let's get started. We got a lot of ground to still cover.
Cool. All right. Lunch will be delayed.
Yes. The longer you take, the longer it is till you get the lunch.
Right. All right. So I logged in as a regulator from Colorado in this case. So you can see some draft.
Go.
One more time.
Lunch is delayed.
Lunch is delayed. That's it. No lunch for you.
Soup Nazi.
That's right. So I've logged in, and we've got draft data calls. I've logged in as a regulator from Colorado, Richard. We see some draft data calls in there, and then we can move over to issued data calls, and of course abandoned data calls. And we keep those around because we may want to use them in the future for data calls. Because one of the things we're looking for is consistency, right? One of the things we heard in design thinking sessions when a regulator said, "Oh, we're only issuing 2 or 3 data calls." It's like, well, yeah, well, you're the actuary for just auto, and you're just one state, so multiply that by 52 jurisdictions, and then all the other lines of business, pretty quickly we're at 150 or so data calls just for that one question you have. And the reality of it is each of those questions are coming from each state in a different format. So from a carrier's perspective, the burden to answer all those different questions coming from all those different directions is very hard. And what we want to be able to do is everybody has the same questions, and even if it's a flood question, for example, in North Dakota versus Connecticut, it may be the same question. The function will give you a different result because the coast or the flood in Connecticut is more coastal. The flood here is more rain driven, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so we want to be able to reuse these things so that the work and the work is easier and the information that comes back is much more valuable across states. So we're going to go ahead and get started. What we'll do is actually draft a data call very quially.
This is what a state would see when
This is
they
what a
go
state
in.
would see.
Okay,
So-
this is the interface they see.
Yeah, and we'll take the commissioner's question this morning. Actually, well, we'll get a little modification on that. So commissioner, the governor, the legislature says, hey, what's the trends of the last 5, the top 5 causes of loss in our state over the last several years? So great, I don't know that. I only know up until 2017, but we'd like to know that in a more current basis. So we'll go ahead and try out a new data call. We're going to take this new system for a ride and see if we can get a more valuable data call to understand these causes of loss and get our markets to participate. So this will be we'll say this is a 5-year cause of loss report, and I'm going to say demo, North Dakota, just for argument's sake. We can pick our line of business, so this will be for homeowners. This will be so we'll say, oops, rolling 5-year cause of loss in P&C. Let's say. This is Colorado, because I'm logged in as Colorado.
Because he's from Colorado?
Because I'm from Colorado. So pressuring that department very hard. And we'll go ahead and say this is going to be from first, and we'll say 2019. So January 1st, 2019, January 1st, 2019, and we'll go through December 31st, 2019. So this will be we'll just do 1 year, even though it's 5-year. Actually, I'll go back. I'll do that. I'll make it 5-year. Sorry. We'll go back all the way to, what year is this? We'll go back to 2015. That's right. Oops. Except I have to go through all the way, sorry. Live demos. 2015, January 1st, and we will end it 2019, December 31st. So that should be 5 years if my math is right. The loss dates, we'll do the same thing. Go back to 2015, January 1st, and the end dates of our losses will be 2019, December 31st. Okay, a couple of fields we added here. So expected public circulation. Again, knowing that we're going to have more data calls, there's some of them may be very quick or very, maybe just a quick answer. Some of them may be for public circulation of this final report, like the auto data call, for example. That ideally this report would be for public circulation. And then there's a deadline. We'll go ahead and say the deadline is going to be tomorrow. Quick, fast turnaround. So the purpose for this is to get a understanding of the trends, cause of loss trends, I'm not going to go too detailed here. But this helps, again, understand the purpose of this. So as a draft data call, as a regulator, I don't put this out there to help the industry know what kind of questions we're trying to answer instead of, and how can we build this into be a better question that actually will serve the industry instead of being something, as one of our participating in design thinking session members said, I'm more like to call my lawyer to question your ability to ask for the data than I am to call my data people to give it to you. So we want to get out of that. So we want to make sure that this is an inviting question, that this is actually going to give the industry a valuable answer. So the idea is that the regulator would say why we're doing this. Here's exactly what data will be, queried, averaged, summarized, etc. And the eligibility requirements. So again, today these will be companies that are writing more than $1 million, and homeowners that are companies that have X percentage of in the market, or everybody that writes a single policy of homeowners needs to participate in this data call, or it's optional, for example. All the eligibility requirements could be in there. Side note on where this is going, as the harmonized data store is filled up according to the information that we have, this will be more of a query type of query builder for a regulator. So the example I use is when you're shopping for a house, and I want something that's 5,000 square feet, and it's got to have air conditioning and a view, and I want it to be on the beach and a big pool, and I want it to be $10,000. Well, all right, all my options just went from a whole bunch of houses to 0 houses. And the same idea is there for the regulators. The regulators that have questions around emerging risks like cyber and sharing, that data may not be available, but the data for causes of loss is readily available over the last 5 years from those high trends. How do we help the regulator ask the right question so they can get a good quality answer in a time frame that makes sense? 3 months, as the commissioner said earlier, is not good enough. They're out of session by then. Answer is no longer relevant. Bad policy's on the way. So these will be more of a query builder. So as they're shopping for data in the market to answer these questions, they'll get a better idea of how accessible that data might be, or how much how quality it is. So this might be large carriers over $1 million. And this is one of the things we're actually trying to get away from. That right now, the bulk of these data calls that are coming are going to the largest carriers. So that's the burden being felt, but we need to know all the policies or all the areas that are going to be impacted by not just broad scale risks like wildfires or catastrophes, but tornadoes and lightning and hail, on a very micro level. So that's all knowable. So we're going to go ahead and save this as a draft. So this is a data call that now a carrier, data call saved. Thank you. Okay, as my page refreshes here. So now that data call is saved, 5-year cause of loss report demo is in a draft. I'm going to go ahead and bounce over to my other window here, where I'm going to log in as a carrier. Different browser. So this carrier is actually logging in on their own environment. So I have my own node that's in my basement, and I'm hitting this same UI on the server that's being delivered from my basement. And here's my logo for my, I forget my name of my company, but made up insurance company. I can see this draft data call that was issued by Colorado, even though it's for North Dakota. I'm going to go ahead and click into that and say, okay, this current version, this seems reasonable. All right, that the purpose, the criteria, the eligibility requirement. Okay, if this turns into a draft, I would be willing to participate in that. So I'm going to go ahead and like that data call. I just like it. The first time these things happen.
Now, explain what that came from in design thinking, the whole like situation.
Yeah, so we wanted to get an idea of, like I said to that question earlier, companies aren't, they're not looking for all new ways to share data with regulators necessarily. So how can we get this information to be a better quality data call? We want better data in there. We want to be able to information to make policy decisions. So we want to have a more palatable and a better rapport with our insurers in the marketplace, and really develop empathy with them. So they want the answer to the question too. We want the market to be fair and resilient, and bad actors identified, and our policyholders coverage. And and as an insurance industry, we want as much risk as we can get money for, right? But these data calls help us manage those things, and that is the idea, to get some more public comments, more feedback, and get an idea from regulators how much participation they might get. Yeah, Siri's very sensitive. She always thinks I'm talking to her.
Siri has a crush on you?
Leave me alone, Siri. So, but the idea, so again, more empathy with the industry about what these data calls are being used for, and then hopefully developing the right data call that, as we see the carriers getting information back, when it comes back into the industry, the right data call will be more valuable not only to regulators, but to the carriers participating in it as well, so they can see where they're going and how they're performing relative to this trend in the industry. So we've liked that data call. So now when I go back into the regulator side, I can go back into this, say, oh, there should be a like. Somebody liked it. Somebody likes me. Cool. So now at this point, great. One like is enough. I'm going to go ahead and issue this data call. Now it's real. Or it will be in a second. Data call has now been issued. So that is an official data call from Colorado for North Dakota data. So now it shows up in our issued column. There's something we need to do at this point as AAIS. So I'm going to go ahead and log out here. Because we've just got the data call, that's in plain English. Those requirements that we saw were what we want that data, what English functions we're going to use. But we have to actually wire this up to the smart contracts. Take this idea, this conceptual data call, and turn it into actual practical working code to bring that data together. So as AAIS, we'll go in and see this issued data call. We'll do a couple of things. And the first time it runs is a little slow, but headless stuff. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and say delivery date on this. We're going to go ahead and deliver this the day after we run the report. We can put a URL in here where the report will be when it ultimately, or this is the forum, excuse me. So public comment areas, we want people to get feedback, not just a like. That may not be enough. If you didn't like it, what's your problem? What would you like to see? How can we make this better? So we want to post to a forum. So we'll say like a comment forum, and we'll put that out there. We'll go ahead and update that. So now as carriers look at that data call, they can see where they can go find comments and see what questions have been asked and how folks are getting more details. So some of those assumptions we were talking about, where those are being
Discussed.
And then what we need to do is actually put an extraction pattern on this, right? So we go down here, we have the report URL, and the report hash, but we need to put an extraction pattern on here. This one's using the cause of loss report. Oh, did I? Oh, sorry, I opened up the wrong one. That's why I'm like, wait, I didn't do an extraction pattern yet. It was out of my order here. Where's the one I just did? Here.
And this is you, AIS?
This is
part?
correct.
Yeah.
This is
Or
us, AIS.
It could be you doing this part.
Yes, it could be you too.
All right.
This could be you.
Well, you could, I mean, you think of the power of that is that, there was a question when we were meeting with you guys around, looking at how financial data, financial reporting data, and Todd's concern was it's so heavy and it's so much. Well, the truth is, if you're writing an extraction pattern for that and you're not getting those data elements anymore, it's not so heavy. Because you're asking that question behind the wall, it's giving you some results, and that's what's coming to you, so you're not
I'm
leaving
waiting
it.
to see what Truman does here.
Okay.
Because I think that this is the hard part. because
This is the hard part, right? So this is how.
You need to be sure you understand the question well
Correct.
enough. And to your point earlier about, are we talking about, all kinds of different ways to look at this data and
Yep.
different interpretations.
Right, so I may have a question of your data, but what else are you getting with that data, right? So whether it's like I may want to know some total losses, but are you giving me address as part of that? Oh wait, no, that's different, right? So what else is really in that question, and what are the details really matter at this point? So what AIS is doing at this point is creating those extraction patterns in the smart contracts that turn the regulator question into the actual code, and actually how this is going to interact with the data. So in this case, it turns out we actually have an extraction pattern already set up for a cause of loss report. And I can go and make sure that this is the right one and see exactly which one it is. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. And this is a plain English description of what this extraction pattern is. Again, for reusability, it provides a summarization of premiums, exposures, and paid loss within the corresponding state, grouped by zip code, liability limit, and cause of loss. Extraction patterns for the reporting years 2016 to 2018, so a little bit different than what I had. It returns aggregated data to interrogate those causes of loss over those liability limits. That's great, but that's still plain English. What is that for real? So I just hit download, and what this is going to do is open me up in Excel in this case, because it's just an Excel file that's giving us a CSV. I'm going to zoom into this so you can see it. But this is an extraction pattern, so it is code. It's not terribly complicated code, but it tells us the line of insurance, the statement line of business, the transaction code, and those things that we just saw in plain English. And this is the extraction pattern that is executed against my data in the harmonized data store, providing this information, written premium, written loss, claim count, and exposure, back to the system. So pretty simple code. So when I go in as a carrier, going back in, get back here. So we're gonna save that. So real quick, as AEIS, we're gonna save that extraction pattern and finish that up. There's other things we can do down here as far as the report URL and hash. We'll do that later. But we're gonna go ahead and update this. So now that data call has got an extraction pattern assigned to it. Back in as a carrier. Refresh this. So I can go back to that North Dakota data call. And I can see what's there. Okay, that's interested. I liked that one before. Yep, okay, remember that. I liked it before. Okay, but now I see this thing is going on. I want to view that extraction pattern, see exactly what's going to happen. Okay, that sounds right. I'm going to go ahead and download that, and I can see exactly what that is. I don't know why it needs me to do that again, but oh, Firefox. Anyway, so I can download that extraction pattern. That extraction pattern is actually saved in a very similar way to the industry data. That extraction pattern has a hash that is on the ledger, so that cannot be changed. So any consent provided to participate in this data call is only to this extraction pattern. So we can't change the question now after you've agreed to participate. We can't say, oh yeah, now we're going to get data to her first names and addresses.
Not going back and asking that.
Exactly. It is a new data call. If we say, oh, it turns out we have to edit it, we do need, the color of the house as well. Okay. That's a new extraction pattern, that is a new data call, and we're going to need a new consent. So there's no way that data is released without your knowledge and awareness. So you can look at the extraction pattern, see exactly what data is going to be touched, what functions are going to be performed, and then as an organization, I can consent to this. Oh, hang on. Oh, I'm logged in as AEIS, sorry.
How was the code that you showed in the CSV file? Where did that come from?
GitHub.
We created that
Yeah, so
particular
You
one, right?
have a programmer write that as opposed to the software,
Yes.
interface doing it?
Yes, that is a map reduce function, and I'll let Joe go into exactly how those are created using the tooling, but the code itself is just text, and then it's deployed ultimately into the platform. In that case, it's saved in openIDL as data with integrity, right? So it can't be changed. And then at runtime, that is leveraged and executed by a Hadoop container inside the node that performs the function to retrieve the data, again, as part of an integrated system, but as a separate component in the architecture. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you show the extraction pattern?
Yes. So this is what the carrier just downloaded. And I'll zoom in here a little bit. So it's pretty straightforward code. I mean, but it is code. It's just it's a map reduce function, and the function right now is an extraction pattern or an interaction pattern. The reality of it is the code that can be executed could be anything, right? It could be an interaction with a third-party model. It could be a complex financial transaction. It could be a proprietary algorithm around something else, right? It could be all kinds of things that are being run in this environment, that, again, for the purposes of trust. Like, how far do you trust that algorithm? How far do you trust that data source? How far do you trust the Weather Channel for data versus somebody's weather station in their backyard as a policyholder? Are you going to pay a claim on that one? Probably not. But you might send out an inspector.
Right.
Where is the years data in that?
Do,
But
do,
you pulled
do,
up
do,
something
do.
that had been pre-built, and it was, I think it said 2017 and 18 or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
The years were different than that.
Yeah, because the extraction
Sorry,
pattern was what
that's
was
not all of it,
previously
right?
built, right? We were,
Yeah, so then you have to modify this previous build to change the years, is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
So did you do that? I didn't know.
No, so in the future, so some of these things, and you'll see some of these things, like that we've parameterized some of the functions in the extraction patterns for reuse. State was the first one that we did, and you can see here, so now I just issued this data call for Colorado. If North Dakota says, that's a fantastic one, we want to do that, copy, change state, North Dakota, save, the extraction pattern doesn't need to be rewritten. So now everybody can do the exact same thing, state by state. If we wanted to do the same thing to have this live dynamically year over year, then we would parameterize.
But you're potentially pulling up a pre-built, tested, you know what it is, you know what it does, and then modifying it, and then putting it back out there to the carrier to say, yes, I'm in.
Right, as a separate one, right? So we may want more detail this year than last year's cause of loss report. Exactly.
Throw in another detail about the extraction patterns is that they're not meant to answer the data call question
Right.
100%. What they're built to do is to extract the data required to answer the question. And so it's doing
Oh, okay.
extraction, fairly anonymizing as well, because we've never been the company information at this stage, and then aggregating to a certain level, then that data is used as a batch fed into the analytics system that's then used to produce whatever the parts of the
It's
data.
a visualization after.
So it's a preparatory stage, it's not the actual report itself.
Correct. It's not the analytics.
Application.
Correct.
So it's intended just to extract the data that you
Yes.
need.
Exactly. Right. And there could be other things. Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
So just really following on all this stuff, right along what he's saying. So from a company perspective, we get to like the plain equals request. Do we also get to chime in on the extraction? How that's written?
Yeah, so there's additional comments as well. Like, so the comments continue after that. So, but once the data call is issued, it's a consent or not consent.
So I got to like the concept of that data call.
Right.
When do I get to see the extraction?
Now, once it's issued, yeah, exactly. So once
So I
the,
don't get to like the extract, I don't get to like the code.
yeah, you like it by consenting it at that point.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you don't, if you don't
And-
want to pull it.
Yeah.
Purpose, so you like the spirit of it, right, then development happens of the extraction pattern and other analytics components of that data call. Then you were asked to consent to your data participation. So you wouldn't consent if you're, had an issue, any part of the process that's happening, which you don't like. That's
What happens if the extraction is written correctly for the PII data and report back to the government?
you're not going to consent your data.
And you're going to put in your comment box, this has PII, I'm not giving it to you.
Yeah, so-
And the person that read it went, oh, snap. Didn't mean to do that.
You saw the forum URL, so the spirit of that is that we would have a space, it's not built as part of an ideal right now, but we can use any kind of forum technology that people can comment and discuss the details.
Shouldn't that be, I know we talked about it before, but shouldn't that be part of the process flow? Like, liking the draft call, and then, you know, I envision it as like, people that have the ability could write that smart contract for you, like, this is how I'm interpreting this call to be. They put that line, you know, the extraction pattern out there for everybody to see.
Yep.
And that would be the first part. Like, if I'm a regulator and I don't have someone that can do that in my office, or should they?
Right.
Like, someone has to do that. It's like a communication vehicle where you can have that to go back and forth would be
Yep.
helpful.
Yeah, and we're, all kinds of ideas like that, and Jim, you certainly know, we've had all kinds of ways to help build this empathy through the process. Again, make it easier, make sure that there's more communication and information, and then also as we look at this, how do we scale it, right? Like you said, there's 1,000 of these data calls, you're not gonna hit 1,000 consent times, right? These are gonna be, you know, if this data call doesn't change, I will answer that every year when it comes up. You know, if this is what, the data call that happens every time there's a Cat 4 storm within 100 feet of my, or 100 miles of my property or something like that, I will let you run that data call. You know, so a lot of these things are gonna have to be automated, facilitated, and really streamlined. And again, to build further empathy, because I think that suggestion as far as being able to like the extraction pattern as well would be extremely valuable. You know, so this is why we're having these meetings, what can we do next to make it better, so, thank you.
And today, the extraction pattern or the development effort by whoever doing
Yes.
that is one of the places we've identified as right for automation as well. So we should get like code generating those extraction patterns, because they are simplistic enough that makes sense. And we have a data standard behind it that we understand what the data structure looks like and what the context within the data is too, so we should be able
Right.
to automatically generate those.
Yeah.
Again, they're not necessarily answering the question, that's not the data that's gonna go to the regulators. This is that intermediary stuff in front of you data, so that it can be data that's right there, extract, optimize, aggregate, and then be used to generate.
But that's why data calls and statistical reporting made such sense to us to start with, because they're pretty static, right? It is what it is, and our stat plan hasn't changed in eons. I know that other stat reporters do modify theirs, or at least do require the companies to add additional data elements, whether that's being reported or not in their stat plan, generally not, but they're requiring you to give them more data. And this is a way for, and again, the regulatory environment's a great environment for this, because much of what you do in the reporting world, think about the blanks. The financial blanks are what they are. They've been built now for how many years, and they're modified and put forward. But those probably would not be very difficult to write an extraction pattern for, because you know what the rules are, and you already have that and implemented inside your systems. But we're talking about doing it in such a way that then you're not generating, we might eventually move from being quarterly reporters and annual reporters to, that's a dashboard. And
Yep.
it has some things that, the regulator sees. The NEIC has, maybe they write that extraction pattern, right? It's not just going to be AIS writing an extraction pattern. The goal is to get the community where they're writing the extraction patterns and the smart contracts, depending upon what you want to know next, or how you want to use the tool next.
Yeah, and these are areas where your staff can start to get involved in actually writing these extraction patterns based on the data you're submitting via statistical reporting. What could you get back out of that data that would help you? That's where we're going right now. We've got some events coming up in the future to help basically seed the fields for folks that have all these great ideas here, here's where you can start to get some information out. So that's where we're building. So at this point in the process, we've got an issued data call, we've got an extraction pattern we just saw, we'll assume that we like it. And we'll say, okay, we're gonna go ahead and consent to this report. Great, so we see that now, when it comes back and refresh, we'll have one carrier's consented to that report. I have to refresh the page in order to do that, but you get the idea. So now the report's there. When it fires, then that extraction pattern runs, and we go through a process. I want to show a couple of things underneath the hood here, though, to actually show you what a ledger looks like. So this is inside the IBM blockchain platform, and I'm looking at it as AIS. So we're looking at our node, and we are on several ledgers for our analytics peer, the carriers that are across multiple carriers, and with a particular first carrier, and this should be the one that just consented to that data call. So we can look and see some of these things. Actually, I want to go back one to the general data call. We're going to look at this one first. This is the default channel. So this is the channel, the ledger that everybody is a part of. Somebody's texting me. So we just saw this. So this is the block that was just created this morning, and we'll go ahead and take a look at what's going on in here. And this is an actual block. So the hash, the transaction ID, and then what happened here. So this is plain text, right? So everybody that's a member of this channel can see this information. This is the data call that was published. I know it may be a little hard to see in there, but this is what's actually written to the blockchain on the ledger. So it's a little codey, but you can see what happened. Update consent count for data call. So this was me clicking, okay, I consent to that. And we can see which one's there. And because we don't have a carrier ID, this case, carrier 1 is not identified, right? We can't even see who did it. We just know that somebody consented to it. If we go back into the other channel, excuse me, sorry, come on, shrink again, there we go. If I go back into the carrier-specific channel, I can see that same like event, but of course it's identified to the carrier. Create consent, but in this case I've got a carrier ID, 54321, but nobody else knows that. So nobody else knows what consent was except for the system. When it comes time, that data will be pulled because of that consent that's only available to the system, not to us, not to the regulators, and the data will be aggregated. So that's how we keep that data completely private for a carrier with their own peer. Now, we've got another, we saw other carriers on, or other peers on here, so the carrier's peer, which is a AIS multi-tenant node. In this case, we do see the information coming from individual companies and could be identified by AIS. We're still serving that trusted role until the data exists inside of an individual carrier's node themselves. If we're doing a multi-tenant environment, you're giving us your data still.
Okay, so let's.
So yeah, anything, so the, real quick, the data actually comes in through APIs. I mentioned those before. This is a quick view of some of them. But like, so for example, that consent we just did, this is the actual API for it, what's required, and you can actually run this, and here's what we just did. We hit the button, and that sent an okay, and returned true when it succeeded. So very simple sorts of things. But this is basically the technical aspect of what openIDL does. You can create a data call, you can list data calls, you can consent to a data call, all those kinds of fun things. But I wanted to show that. We don't need to get into the chain code, but I happily show that too. No chain code.
No chain code.
But the point is, it's
But
not
the
that hard.
idea, and we show you this because you can see all this. It's built for that transparency, right? You always understand what's going on underneath the hood with the call that's happening. So if you want to get in the weeds of the technology, you can, but you don't have to. And again, we probably need to move on to
Data
what
side.
happened.
Right. So the, so now that is there, the log back in as the regulator, I now see that I've got a carrier consented, and we're just waiting for the data call at this point to fire and the data to be rolled up into the reporting presentation. And with that, I think we'll let me go back to the deck here.
So now we're gonna show, okay, so that's how the interface happens, right? And you've seen some of the deep down underneath into the actual technology working itself. So what do you get from that, right? Because you're sitting here going, okay, I've probably done a lot of work to get my data into this node, and I'm probably gonna, and if I'm committed to this is the way I'm gonna do some business here in the future, and this is kind of the next step in the future. But what do I get? What does it look like for me, right?
Right.
So go.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
So when it comes out in the reports, and we've, and having a little VPN issue, we'd be able to show you more of this live, but the report that comes out, this is where it comes out from the multiple carriers, and I'll get over here, but what we're seeing are the by zip code bubbles of causes of loss, and this is an interactive report, so if you're familiar with Tableau or Cognos, instead of a static PDF, as a regulator, you'll be able to go in and drill down into certain causes of loss, into certain jurisdictions, and see kind of what's happening, but only to a certain level of granularity, only to a zip code, only, not specific to a carrier, specific to different causes of loss, specific to an annualized number as opposed to potentially seasonally. For example, we want to know what our wood-burning stove losses look like, and are there preventative things that we can do that might be more effective, let's say, in November or December, and maybe not so much in July. Things like that. How can we do better policy and again, do steps to mitigate those potential losses? So that's what it looks like across the multiple carriers. When you look at it from a single carrier, you actually get that next level of visibility. You can see what's happening at a zip code level, but also with your data accessible to you in your interface. Again, you're looking at this from your system. Your analytics are being provided from your front end, leveraging the data of the distributed network and putting your data on top of it that nobody else can see. So you can see how your individual policies are relating to the water line on that, at that particular zip code for that particular risk at that particular time of year. Where might you expect more losses coming up at your higher risk properties in the hotter zip codes, for example? So
What's the front end system? What's mapping?
in this case, it's Tableau, but it could be anything. Because the output, the report output could, in this case, it's a robust, visualization, but it could be in the future, as, Robin's saying, as a dashboard, is everybody obeying the rules? Yes, the report says yes. It could be a very simple report. The example we use a lot is the, are you over 21 kind of a question. Instead of saying, give me a driver's license, which has your lovely picture and your actual date of birth and where you live and all that kind of stuff, I look at that to see that, oh yeah, it's a state ID, it's not expired, you're you, that kind of stuff. But in the future, I could just say, are you over 21? And the loaded part of that question is it not expired? Is it issued by a valid state ID? All these other things, and I can just get to a yes. With that trusted information here, we can get to is everybody following the rules, you know, or something like that. Maybe it's not, these aren't
Or
enforcement,
maybe
it's trends, it's not enforcement.
maybe that view for the regulator is for a company, but says something like, are you within the limits of your RBC?
Right.
Yes. Or here's the little graph and the little line moves, right? But the better part is you'll see that too,
Right.
first.
Yeah, and the other thing is on those, and that was a great point. So that extraction pattern, and Brian, to your question, you can take that extraction pattern, and because you can see it even before you consent it, you know what your data is going to say before the extraction, before the data call goes, right? So you can say, I'm going to take that extraction pattern, copy and paste it, query my data, see what it says, and then I can consent to the data call.
Yeah.
So you're not, again, putting anything out there, you know, answering any questions to which you do not already know the answer. Very important. One of those things that, you know, was a deal breaker, you know, kind of, you're not going to share data, you know, don't ask any questions to which you do not already know the answer.
Rule of
Or
lawyering.
certainly don't answer any. All right, so that's how the visualization comes out at the end. The opportunity to present the data is going to be highly variable and completely customizable. We saw briefly in the UI about where that the destination report lives. The idea is that would be on a particular node, and then there's a verification of the hash that says this is the report that AI has officially delivered, that the regulators officially approved, and that the one you're looking at is that same one, hasn't been modified, hasn't been changed to skew it. If there were multiple versions, you'd be able to see that. Here's the one AI has published. The regulators didn't like it. They made us AI has published a different one. We had to put some comments in there because there was a color scheme issue or something. And then we issued the new report, and that's the one that's ultimately seen. So again, there's integrity to know that what data was ultimately submitted all the way through to the visualization you're seeing at the end on which to make policy decisions and what have you are being shown. So all the report itself is hashed. All of the elements are there so that, again, completely traceable. So before we jump into the data standard, I know that was a lot to throw at you in a little bit.
Yeah.
Any questions, anything you want me to hit again? Anything you want me to show? And then, because we have 7 minutes before lunch.
Where was the analytics code?
So the analytics code,
Site extraction, I get that now.
Yep, yep.
The analytics.
So that actually lives in Tableau as the report output, right? So it's expecting the resulting information from the extraction pattern.
That was on your analytics node.
Correct, right? So the analytics node actually has, in this case, Tableau installed. And then and Tableau is looking at the data store that is resident on that peer, as it's populated, coming out from the resulting data call, the report visualizes. What's that?
S3 bucket.
Yep, S3 bucket, whatever it happens to be. Yeah, I mean, again, it could be a variety of different things. It could be raw data, or it could be a simple yes, no. It could be presented in any number of different ways for the purpose, right? Because we've talked about it before. These data calls could be any number of reasons, or timeliness, or detail, or, you know, they could be exploratory. We need actual loss history data to determine what the policy is going to be on this thing we don't know about yet, right? Or it could be, hey, you know, it's raining more. It rained last year too. Right? Is it changed?
Yeah.
So those things are going to be a little bit easier. So there's more details or different outputs, and it's designed to be very flexible. As we get into some other patterns, you know, not just by month, but by week, even by day, as we get into other entities and objects that we're tracking, not just stuff and policies and claims, but people and places and cars and things and weather and other circumstances and context that we need to understand. More of those things will be trapped in the system or locked in the system for integrity, so that we know, yes, you did in fact get 2-inch hail in your yard, you know, because of this station, we agreed reports on it, or this weather system, or this radar station. We're going to trust that to tell me if it's 2-inch hail. If you get 2-inch hail, we're going to send somebody out, or we're going to give you $1,000, or we're going to do something because we know your house is leaking, right? So those are the kind of things we can do. So,
Okay.
any more questions? I don't know, we do lunch first or data
Yeah,
first?
I think we do lunch, because
So that means you get lunch early for no questions?
So let's just do the wrap-up, though. I think there's a wrap-up slide, right?
No, that was data standard, that was it. And then we go right into data standard.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh, okay, well, my
So
bad.
that, we can do a quick, you know what, let me do that real quick, just go back through the phases, you know, of the example, the preparation and getting to empathy and building the data call, preparing the data call and consenting to it, so you can see actually what's happening, making sure that your data isn't revealing anything that you don't want to know, and then or you don't want revealed, and then the analytics are such that they're actually now bringing value back to the entire industry, including the carrier participating, and the process itself should be far easier, again, and reusable to provide better visibility, not only across an organization, but across a state and across our entire insurance market.
So we're gonna break for lunch. A couple of pieces of information for you. You'll go through the line by the coffee makers in the lunchroom and just tell them you're part of the AAIS group. And there is a separate room to actually sit in. And there was something, Lori, was there something else I was supposed to say?
So when you check out, go to the register closest to the coffee pots.
Yeah, that's what's it. Mhm.
Okay.
And just tell them you're with us. We got the bill at the end of the day. So and then there's a separate room in there for us to sit together. Please, ask questions, discuss this during lunch. Your concerns are as important to us as that's the greatest thing since sliced bread, because we can't make better if we don't know what the concerns are. And then so when we come back, we'll touch on the data standards, which, Denise mentioned earlier, the data is the hard part. Data's the hard part. So we're going to talk about how we develop those initial data standards and Joe's experience around how that gets loaded and what it might look like for you and how we could scope an initial pilot. And that's when we'll move into design thinking about what a pilot around this would actually look like. Because we want to give you not just the value of saying you did statistical reporting in a blockchain, but give you maybe there's some value we can attain in a smaller subset of data that is a easy win for everyone. And we can say, we actually did this, we did it on a blockchain, we
valuable.
used, and it was valuable back to us to get that. So we'll go through some exercises in design thinking that try to identify that. So thank you all and have a great lunch, and please be back here in 45 minutes. So you got 45 minutes to have lunch. So what's that, 12:45?
Thank you very much.
I might let you go to 12:50, but.